Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business. Looking forward to talking to Ranya Nehmeh. Ranya, it's great to connect with you. I appreciate you calling in all the way from Vienna. You are an HR strategist, you're an author, you're an adjunct professor, and you're the author of In Praise of the Office, The Limits to Hybrid and Remote Work. So thanks so much for being on the show. I appreciate it again. And here's where I want to start. Jack Welch has been quoted that HR is the most important department within a company. And I think sometimes HR gets overlooked, and sometimes people look at HR in one way when really it's a very multidimensional group within an organization. Many will say it's the backbone, the employee-centric, the safe place for people to come to. And some people think of it as just the place you get benefits, right? And so just let's define what HR does in a multidimensional way of what HR really should be and the way people should be thinking about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, John. I think the role of HR has changed drastically over the last years. So, I mean, I'm not going to talk about the history of how we've moved from being, more of a admin function to more of a strategic function. But I definitely think in the last 5 years, especially with the pandemic, the role of HR has really kind of been elevated and enhanced. Because now we were always dealing with the whole employee experience cycle, right? So everything from recruitment to career development and performance, all the way to to exit interviews. But I really, in the last years, there's been much more that we are looking at, which is everything from culture, from employee well-being, from issues like psychological safety. So all of these are also within the realm of HR. So I think the notion of HR has really, it's kind of expanded quite a lot. And we elaborated on this also in, I had written this Harvard Business Review article with my co-author, Professor Peter Capelli from Wharton, last year in the Harvard Business Review about HR's changing role. And it's really about how we really have to be, again, employee advocates, because the employees are obviously going through a lot of change in this period. So we have to go back to the basics of really taking care of our employees, in addition to being strategic partners to the business.
That's great. So let's talk about that. You're talking about how things have changed over the since COVID, specifically over the last year. The hybrid world, it used to be HR, everyone was in the office and everybody knew where HR was. And now you can hire best of class all over the globe. And so let's just kind of dive into a little bit of your book. Again, the name is In Praise of the Office, The Limits to Hybrid and Remote Work. How does HR play that same role when, what used to be just conversations, people talking in the office, now there's email, there's text, there's Zoom, there's Teams, there's, et cetera, et cetera. How does HR work today in a hybrid world?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that is one of the main challenges, not just for HR, but generally for leaders and employees. Although hybrid is the preferred means of working for most people, but it comes with a lot of challenges. And that is really what we have seen over the last 5 years. So, for example, for HR, there's so many new things we need to look into, like new hires. New hires, it's very difficult for them to learn in this kind of hybrid setting, because especially if you are early young career professionals, you need guidance, you need a mentor, you need support. You only see how things are happening when you see them sometimes, you observe them. And it's difficult to replicate that over Zoom. So, that's something that HR people have to take into account, is how, for example, how to onboard people in a way where they really can become productive, quicker rather than later.
I have a question before we move on, because I think that's a real problem. The hybrid workplace for onboarding, especially as you're saying, well, just to focus on what you said, the newer people coming into the workforce. I learned by watching others and being surrounded by other people. always in those nuanced moments. You learn a lot getting coffee, walking around, observing, sitting in meetings back to back. There's so much. And what does it look like 3 years from now? I can tell you as a business coach, when I was coaching people, I've had my business for almost 11 years. And when I was coaching people during COVID that were new, that did not have an office to go to, there was an absolute lag of their knowledge in a significant way, because they weren't spending, 8, 10, 12 hours a day in an office watching and learning through just everything we just talked about. That fast forward that 3 years, what does that look like? Assuming, it does, that hybrid piece doesn't change.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And well, everything has to become intentional, more intentional. So what we mean by that is really you're going to have to, organizations will have to put practices in place in a more intentional way,
Yeah.
bearing in mind that we do not have these spontaneous collaborations maybe as frequently or as much as before. So, you're going to have to get people together for other reasons or for particular reasons. And they have to be for reasons that you cannot do alone at home. Because when you call people into the office and then everybody's sitting in their own, let's say, space on a Zoom call, it completely defeats the purpose of bringing people together. So, for the future, what we have to do is create intentional structure. So, you need to come into the office on these days because we have, there's mentoring, there's innovation sprints, there's team meetings, there's all of those things where you really are socially with people, rather than doing them from home. So
Yeah.
everything has to become more intentional.
Yeah, I think that seems to be a very, the word right now, intentional, because it does take time to plan your day with intent, to plan the year with intent, to take that moment of pause. I want to talk about that for a second, because intent, there's a lot behind the word intent. Having a meeting, taking a moment, putting some stillness, putting some reflection, paying attention to what's in the best interest of everyone. So just kind of talk about intent, how to prep for intent, how to think about intent, how to make intent a through line of your day as you're planning, because I don't think this is going away. Excuse me. I don't think this is going away. It's only going to get a little bit more hybrid. It's only going to get a little bit more remote. And I think there's a lot of advantages of it too. I mean, people with families, and there's a lot of pluses to it. I'm not suggesting that you can only learn in the office, but I was hoping you would kind of take it down this path of intent with of spontaneous, meetings being recreated in just a little bit of a different way. But how does someone reverse engineer to make that part of the through line of their day and the way that they think?
Mm-hmm. I think, here the managers and leaders have a very big role when we talk about intent. Because, for example, as an employee, I can go into the office with my own personal intention of, okay, today I'm going to try to talk to this person and I'm going to be more mindful of certain things. But at the end of the day, people don't work individually, they work in teams, and they work in, sometimes big teams. So I think this is really the leader's role that needs to bring people together, again, with intention. And I know it's difficult sometimes because, if you're, for example, telling people, come into the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays because we have team meetings, and then one of your colleagues says, yes, but on Monday I have I have to pick up my children. Nobody wants to be the bad guy and say, no, you can't do that. You have to be in the meeting at that time, right? So, you have to find the balance, but also you have to, in a way, be a bit more, I don't want to say strict, but if you want to bring people together, I think there is an element of the leaders really need to enforce that and to role model that behavior, because
Yeah.
you cannot tell people, please come into the office, but then the leaders are working from home on those days, right? So
Right.
it really has to be modeled from the top
Yeah.
down.
All in one team.
Yeah, exactly.
You're an adjunct professor, so you're teaching people. So I want to talk a little bit about the education system today. Where do we need to start teaching this?
Mhm. Well, honestly, I teach actually a module called Leadership in the New World of Work, and it's for students who are master's students, so they're early 20s. And already, I'm always surprised because they already have such a deep understanding. Not, I mean, maybe not deep, but they're already very aware of the workplace, of how things are happening right now, of hybrid, of the pros and the cons. So I think that, this is already part of, we used to call it's the future of work, but it's actually the now because it's
Yeah,
already happening. So the future of work is probably going to be something very different because right now we are already teaching that. And the students already know that. So I think already in their bachelor's degrees, this is something that they cover these days.
and what are some of the ideas that they bring to the table? Because I would think that they bring a fresh perspective that isn't caught in um, the yesteryears of not being able to let go of what was.
Mhm. I think what is very interesting about these younger generations is that development, their own development is key. It's a priority, and they acknowledge, and they're very realistic about the fact that no, they want to learn from people. They want to be face to face with their managers. They want feedback, continuous. They want somebody to support them in their development. And I think for me that was personally a surprise because the first time I had worked remote was only 5 years ago. My whole career, 20 years, was in the office. So for me, it was a revolution, actually, revolutionary. But for these guys already, they love the flexibility, that's for sure. And I think they do need a level of flexibility, but they really do acknowledge the need to actually learn from people who already, have been in the workplace for a long time.
Yeah. So they're learning from people. Let's talk about how they're learning from AI and the lens that they, but really also HR and your insights onto the impact that AI is having not only for in HR globally, but also the responsibility of HR to maybe police a little bit of AI and what's going on and what's not, and how where does that all play a role from your eyes?
John, I think the thing with AI right now is that everybody's kind of muddling through and everybody's kind of figuring it out. And
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything really that is so fixed right now as to what is the best practice or how can we move this forward or what are people doing, because it's so varied, but everybody's still kind of in the trial and error phase.
yeah,
So a lot of organizations, for example, that I've spoken to, they don't encourage their employees to use AI in a lot of in recruitment and other areas. Of course, others are almost using AI agents to attend meetings. One of the professor that I co-authored this with, he was telling us that he had heard and he had seen in many occasions when he was on meetings, people were not even attending meetings. They had sent their AI agents to attend those meetings. So I think that we are still right at the beginning of this. And I think it's going to be very interesting how this plays out because a lot of people are saying there's a lot of hype. But I think time will tell how we develop in that direction.
yeah. I agree. Everybody's trying to figure it out, and it seems to be getting a lot faster these last
Mhm.
couple of months, and that
Mhm.
doesn't seem to be slowing down. Let's talk a little bit more about your book. Tell again, in praise of the office, what is the reader going to get when they read your book?
Mhm. Well, I think they will get a very balanced perspective of some of the challenges that we face, that employers face when they have a hybrid workforce. And we also propose, some actionable things that people can do, that employers can do as well, to kind of fix it in a way. I do also want to underline that although it's called In Praise of the Office, we're not necessarily saying everybody come back to the office. We're just saying there are two sides to the story and that we have seen a lot of issues in the last years. And these issues did not creep up actually immediately when we all started to work from home, because a lot of those, challenges that we're talking about are not related to like productivity So you don't really measure them. You don't put them on a dashboard and measure them like you do productivity, right? So a lot of them are things like collaboration and innovation and the social fabric that makes up the organization and all of these, which in a way you don't measure so directly.
Yeah.
That's why we only saw these challenges years later.
Yeah. If you were to kind of go into a company as an HR strategist, what are one or two things that you look for so that maybe companies, I don't want to say that they're doing it wrong, but one or two things that they're missing that they need some extra guidance on?
Mhm. Well, I think from the simplest part first is things like the managers and their KPIs. Because what we saw is that a lot of times now, when people have their KPIs, they're very focused on their individual output, right? And when they're asked for help in hybrid settings, they either take a lot of time until they help, or they kind of do it really at the end. So this whole notion of helping people is no longer there. And it's very difficult again for newcomers because, they need that kind of help, right? So I think it is important for managers to have at least one KPI to really show, like, to help somebody, to mentor. It has to be reflected in there, otherwise it won't happen. So I think that is really important. The second thing is just meeting effectiveness. Right now we're going through a phase of there are just too many meetings, and what we've seen over the last years is that meeting effectiveness has kind of gone down.
Yeah.
Because we tend to invite more and more people to the meeting because it's hybrid and we don't have space constraints. People's cameras are off, so probably because they're multitasking. And then we have the rise of post-meeting meetings because people were not actually concentrating during the meeting, so we need to discuss it again after. And all of this has created a lot of inefficiency. Companies that are doing really well remote are the ones who have very intentional guidelines of how to do good meetings, who to invite, agenda, how long, so many factors. And I think this is something that is so simple, but managers could tackle that easily.
So simple, it's complicated. I have
Yeah.
a workshop training that I do. It's called Cut Your Meetings in Half.
Ah,
And,
there you
and
go.
because I see it all the time and I hear it all the time that, and meetings are way too long. There's no agenda. There's people leave with no action items. It's really, it really is simple. I'm not sure why people don't understand, don't, I'm not sure why people overcomplicate it, but it really is that simple. I think community, really important. We talk about this a lot on this podcast. I talk about this a lot in my blogs and things that I write, but it sounds like people can really get some good tools from your book. Tell them where they can buy your book.
Sure. Well, you can buy the book on Amazon. You can also go to my website. I have a few links there. You can buy directly on the Pen Press website or Barnes and Noble as well.
That's great. All right, let's do a quick speed round. I see you have a bunch of books behind you. What's a book that's had the biggest impact on you?
Oh, I actually love the Phil Jackson 11 Rings book.
Yeah,
I was
that's
a big fan, a big basketball fan back in the day. So for me, this is such a great leadership book and
yeah,
team.
yeah. He's great. He's great. That's a great book.
Yeah.
Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
Don't worry too much about other people think. Just do your own thing.
The fact is, they rarely do, right, about you.
Yes, it's true.
Last question, finish a sentence. One thing everybody can do to get more intentional is
to create moments that matter.
That's great.
Is to read, yeah.
That's great. Think community, really important through line of today's talk. Be intentional. Be intentional in everything that you do. Be intentional for yourself. Be intentional for those that you lead. Be intentional for those who are attending meetings that you have. Be conscious of other people's time and pay attention to the minutes. Every 4 minutes saved a day is 24 hours a year. So if you have unnecessary meetings, you are talking about hundreds, if not thousands of hours a year that are wasted. It's really much easier than people think to work 2 years or 3 years in 1 year if you can just be a little bit more intentional with time and meetings and many things under the HR umbrella that I'm sure you can read in the book In Praise of the Office, which can be found everywhere we talked about earlier. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Ranya, for coming on the show. This was great. Tell everybody where they can connect with you and maybe who your ideal clients are.
Perfect. Thanks, John. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest. Or you can just drop me a line as well, info@ranyanehmeh.com. And yeah.
It's great. Ranya, thank you so much. Think community. If the book can help you, please buy it. Ranya, thank you so much. And if anybody wants to talk about any coaching or trainings, keynotes, you can reach me at johnwaskin.com. Ranya, thanks so much.
Thank you.